really with Toshiba is to work with retailers like yourself, medium to smaller grocers, coast to coast in the US, and work with them on retail solutions. One of those solutions is self-checkout. And I can tell you, there's not a retailer today that I can think of that has not taken a serious look or already implementing self-service. And there's for a number of reasons, and we're going to go through that. And also, it's interesting over the past 4 or 5 months, you've probably noticed that self-checkout is kind of in the crosshairs when it comes to shrink and things like that. So I'm going to address some of those concerns. So my goal is hopefully I'll give you enough information where you can make an intelligent decision on whether it makes sense to move to the next step or not. And like Angel said, I'll be happy to answer some questions. So this is really kind of the first step. Those of you that are existing Toshiba customers, thank you. I appreciate your business. We appreciate your business and all that you do for us. And hopefully those of you that are not, hopefully you'll become a believer by the time I get done. So I'm going to go off video because I like to talk with my hands, and we'll kind of get started. So what are we going to talk about? A little bit about why Toshiba. Again, I'll spend 2 or 3 seconds on who we are, where we came from, what we're doing. Talk about trends. What's causing change in the industry? Why is self-checkout exploding the way it is in the marketplace and growing like crazy? How do you remove friction from your front end, right? Nobody likes to wait in line. So what are some of the things you can do as a retailer to minimize that customer frustration that they get when they're waiting in line? We'll talk about self-checkout. That's why we're here. But you know, you can't talk about self-service without talking about loss prevention. So I'm going to sprinkle in some things that we're doing with loss prevention, some things that are available today, some things that will be available tomorrow when it comes to self-service. Again, you can't talk about self-service without talking about the shopping experience. They go hand in hand. The biggest thing I want you to take away is self-service does not have to be no service, right? 2 very different things. Now, don't compare yourself to the retailer down the street, the big national chain, where they think self-service implies no service. That's what gives self-service a bad rap. You don't have to follow suit with what they do. So we'll address that. The back office system server kind of ties it all together. And then how do you get it to work in your stores? And that's where the STCR team comes into play with their different managed services. And then we'll kind of sum it up. So let's start. So at a high level, if you remember back in 2012, IBM decided to divest their retail business to Toshiba, kind of like the way they divested their PCs and laptops and printing systems and storage server systems and things like that to other companies. Toshiba was looking to expand. So back in 2012, Toshiba purchased our entire retail group. So all of the assets, all the intellectual properties, all the patents, and about 2,000 of us came over. We're a wholly owned subsidiary of Toshiba on the left-hand side. We're Toshiba Global Commerce Solutions, TGCS for short, based out of Durham, North Carolina, right outside of Raleigh. And then our sister company, which is Toshiba Business Solutions, which is called Tabs. They're more of your office products. That's kind of our sister company. So again, we're newly headquartered out of Durham, North Carolina. Again, back in 2012, Rance Polar is our new CEO. Why is that important to you? I want you to think about something, right? We did this divestiture from IBM back in 2012. It is now 2024, and I can assure you, if you go to any retail establishment in your town somewhere, you're going to see some IBM point of sale, IBM self-checkout, IBM peripherals at that front end somewhere, which goes to show how long our equipment actually lasts, which is huge. And this is the reason why a lot of these large companies that you see on the screen right now, right? 60% of the top 25 retailers use our systems today. So every one of these that you see on the screen, whether it's Kroger, whether it's Walmart, whether it's Safeway, Albertsons, Costco, you name it, they're using our gear. So it's the exact same solutions that STCR is talking to you about. So you're kind of in good company. Since I'm a grocery guy and I only focus in the grocery segment, I love this chart. We've been #1 in point of sale since the 70s when you include our IBM heritage. But if you look at the bottom of the chart, 9 out of the top 10 US grocers use our systems today. So it just goes to show the reliability and the robustness of our systems. That doesn't include all the patents that we do and all the other countries that we do business in. And here's my last advertising chart. Here's just a lineup of our POS systems, of our peripherals, of our self-service systems, all on one page. So if you haven't experienced using any of these solutions, I highly encourage you to get with STCR and have them show you some of these different products. And obviously, we're going to talk about the products in the bottom right-hand side of the chart. So we'll dive in and talk about what's causing change. Well, we know from the last few years, and it continues to happen, and I probably really need to update this chart, and that is labor rates continue to rise, right? Those of you up in the Northeast, let's say New York specifically, you already know this. I was out west last week, and I heard a lot of the crazy things that are going on in California, where now the wage for fast food is over $20 an hour. So wages continue to drive labor rates. Labor rates just continue to go up, which really drives a lot of change from a retailer perspective, right? If you look at some of the things that next, they do a lot of convenience store stuff. The Great Resignation, right? Employees are looking to change their current employment based on the lack of wages that they're getting, right? You may have a Target close by to you, right? They're starting cashiers at $24 an hour. So how do you compete with some of those things as a retailer, right? And if you look at the latest Lambert report from quite a few months ago, basically the number one concern for most grocery CEOs is labor. Labor continues to drive the market. So if you heard me maybe, I don't know, year and a half, 2 years ago, the biggest thing, the reason why people did self-service was because they wanted to save labor, right? That was usually the thing they wanted to do, is they wanted to save labor rates. It was getting too expensive. Now you can't find labor, right? That's been the number one motivator for most retailers. Is it's not only you can't afford to pay them, now you can't even find people that want to work. And that still seems to be the biggest thrust that's causing people to do self-service in their stores. So if you look at our most recent stat, basically it says 94% of grocers are either using self-checkout or planning to use it, right? And that leaves about 6%. 6% of the grocers have no plans to do it. And I always ask myself, Paul, why is that? But you know what? When I talk to the grocer, I realize those grocers that say, you know what, self-service is not for me, they don't understand self-service. And hopefully by the time I get done, if you're one of that 6%, you'll kind of understand the meaning behind that. But truly, it's not just about labor rates. It's not just about can't find labor, right? There's more to it than that. We'll discuss that. So these are some larger chains that we have either rolled out our self-checkouts or in the process of rolling them out. So again, just a great install base, which continues to grow, and this just grows more and more every single day. But outside of the big chains, these are smaller grocers. These are grocers like yourself. Maybe you have one store, maybe you have 5 or 10 stores. These are all independent, small regional chains, independent grocers that have moved forward and went with our self-checkout systems. A lot of these are STCR customers. Again, these are not ones that are looking at it. These are the ones that have done it. So the moral of the story is, it's not a question of whether self-service works, right? It's whether it will work for you in your store, with your staff, with your customers. And if you follow best practices, you're going to get great results. So before I go forward, I want to step backwards real quick. So I don't know if anybody remembers back in 2011, Albertsons made a big statement in the industry, and they said, I think Hy-Vee did the same thing. We're removing all self-checkouts from our stores to provide a better customer service, right? It's like, wow. That really stalled the industry when it came to self-service, right? Then they teamed up with Toshiba back in 2019, and they started implementing self-service in all their stores. So you got to ask yourself, why would this massive retailer get rid of millions of dollars of self-checkout in 2011 to turn around and reinstall self-checkouts in 2019? Is it the technology change? Not really. It's more of the philosophy behind self-checkout has changed. When you learn to look at self-checkout in a different lens, through a different lens, you'll really start to see, why does it make more sense now than it did before? And a lot of it had to do with how it got implemented within the store. And that's extremely important. But let me ask you this, you're a retailer. Do you think your shoppers buy more when they're in their store, when they're in your store, or when th're online? I think you know as better than anybody, people that come into the store, shoppers prefer to go into the store, touch and feel, than they do to buy something online. And that's where they can get the proper experience while they're in the store, because obviously shopping off of a screen doesn't give you a good experience like you would in your store with your cashiers and your employees helping those shoppers. So really, shoppers prefer to do that, right? If you ask me what's the next turn of the crank, right? The next turn of the crank is those retailers that started with 4 self-checkouts are moving to 6. Some are adding more. Some retailers went to 80% self-checkouts on the front end, right? We've seen that over and over again over the last couple of years. Walmart, here's a perfect example, right? They're doing 80 plus self-checkouts in certain stores, trying it out, right? We know how well that's going. Albertsons did the same thing out west. They did 80% self-checkouts in some stores. Harris Teeter's a local chain here in the North Carolina area. In Charlotte, they converted all lanes to self-checkouts in the front of the store, but they didn't cut any jobs. Now that was an interesting twist, right? They went all self-checkouts, but they didn't remove any labor. Why is that? We'll talk about that. But here's what happened. It all backfired on them, right? If you look at the trade rags from the last 6, 7, 8 months, self-checkouts are being removed from Walmart. They're being removed from Costco and Wegmans. That's not true. They're just retooling. They're reanalyzing what they did with self-checkout. A lot of them, like Walmart, are realizing, hey, we went too far. 80% was way too far, right? We started to remove customer service. I think Wegmans is sitting at 40 or 50% self-checkouts now in certain stores. So my point is, a lot of retailers went overboard. Now, let's face it, right? I'm not in their shoes. You're not in their shoes. It could have been because of labor, right? They may have had to do that out of desperation because they couldn't get the labor in that particular location. So we can't judge them for that. But my point here is, don't go too far when it goes to self-service. You got to have a balance within your store, and we can definitely help you kind of get through that and what you're trying to solve for. So let's talk about, how do you remove frustration from your front end, right? How do you provide an exceptional customer experience at the same time have operational efficiency at the store? So by doing self-checkout in your stores, you're giving shoppers choice and control. There's certain shoppers that come in and they prefer to have control of the transaction, but more importantly, choices. By only offering traditional lanes, you're forcing them to go get in line, whether it's express or not, behind somebody else to go check out. By giving them a choice, now you're giving them the option to use self-checkout or not. I said you got to give them the option. So that means you got to have POS lanes open. You got to have self-checkout lanes open. I'm a self-checkout user. I want to get in and get out. I don't have time for chit-chat. So I'm not looking to go to a cashier. But you may have other people, they have a lot of extra time. They want to go to the regular lane and give them that option to do it, right? Maybe giving them a private shopping experience, right? Maybe there's personal hygiene items, things they want to buy. So give them that private experience through a self-service type device. The big advantage here is when you get a slammed on the front end, right? You get a spike on the front end. Instead of grabbing employees from other areas of the store, messing up your operations, those self-checkouts will help absorb some of that spike on the front end, right? So basically, your queue times at the front end would be reduced without increasing your labor costs. But here's the kicker. If you remember the Harris Teeter store I talked to you about that did all self-checkouts and didn't remove any labor, they redeploy the labor elsewhere in the store. And if you can do that, you're going to drive higher sales. And that's where the rubber meets the road when you do self-service correctly. Because we know that 50% of shoppers coming into the store don't know everything they want to buy. 93% can't find an associate to help them in the aisle. 85% would buy more if they did. And 90% of the people would probably return to the store if they got the help that they needed, right? So if you peel back that 50% a little bit, the scary part is 90% of shoppers would leave without buying anything if they couldn't find what they were looking for in your store and they didn't get the help. But the staggering number was 80% of the retailers reported that they've seen an increase in basket size 20 to 50% per transaction if the shopper got the help in the aisle. So the moral of the story is, if you can redeploy the saved labor that you're going to have when you go to do self-checkout, assuming you can find labor, you're going to like your results. And that's really the goal of what we're doing here. So the goal here is you got labor cost is increasing. You can't find labor, right? Redeploy the labor elsewhere in the store. You can improve the shopping experience by improving the experience for the shopper. You're improving your loyalty, your customer sat, which means you're going to increase your revenues. And that's what we're trying to get to when you do that. So how does that work with self-service? So think about it. Today, when they come into your store, I'm a shopper. I go to your front end and I'm waiting in line, right? I don't care whether you got 1 lane or 5 lanes. I'm waiting in line behind other shoppers. You have a one-to-one queuing opportunity there within the actual store, right? So you have multiple lanes. If you go ahead and drop in some self-checkout lanes right in the center, if you do it the right way, basically you have 1 to 4 queuing. So what do I mean by that? You have 1 line going in, 4 ways to get out. So the shopper's impression is I can get in and get out quicker if I use self-checkout versus 1-to-1. Now, we both know that a cashier is a lot faster than a shopper, but the shopper doesn't realize that. They think they can be just as fast. So my point here is the reason why self-checkout works so well within grocery stores is because it's 1-to-multiple, 1-to-4, 1-to-6 type of environment. And that's kind of the environment you want to create for that shopper. So am I talking the big bang approach? No. I always recommend to a retailer, you know what? I already said we know self-checkout works. I just don't know whether it's going to work for you or not. So we always recommend go into one of yours. If you have multiple stores, go into one store as a pilot. You have to put a minimum of 4. You never go less than 4. That's a different conversation, but there's reasons behind that. But you need to put in at least 4. If you got room, put in 6. You assign one shopper assistant to work with those. You follow best practices. You're going to have great results. If you have great results, then you can decide if you want to keep doing it in other stores. This is what Wegmans did years ago. They were all about customer service. They refused to do any type of self-checkouts. And then they decided to listen to us, and they went forward with a couple lanes in the prepared food areas. They had good results. Then they dabbled with 4 on the front end. They had good results. Now they just opened a store here in Wake Forest, North Carolina, a couple miles from me. I think they have like 12 self-checkouts and 14 POS lanes. Yes, it's a big front end, but my point is they're almost at 50-50. But they started with one store, a few lanes to see if it worked, and that's kind of where we always recommend you start. So let's talk about our System 7 self-checkout. This is our 4th generation of self-checkout. I'm going to show a quick video so I can get a drink of water, and you can kind of get a quick overview of what the solution looks like. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. So there's really 4 different categories of self-checkouts. We're going to focus on the 2 on the right, but there are other ones that we can talk to you about later on. But the 2 on the right, obviously the one third from the right is card only. So again, doesn't accept cash. The one on the far right accepts cash. Here's kind of a snapshot of many of our models, obviously not all of them, but to kind of give you a good gist of it, we kind of go from small, medium, large, carousel, extra large, double XL. And that's all based on the bagging size. So what are you trying to solve for? Are you trying to solve for express orders, or are you trying to solve for large orders, right? The only difference between the ones on the top and the ones on the bottom, the ones on the top accept cash, the ones on the bottom do not. That's the big difference. I would say the sweet spot for most grocers is the large up at the top there. That gives you enough room for paper bags, reusable bags, you name it. So it gives you some flexibility. I personally don't like the small and the medium. You don't have a lot of real estate for baggings. I understand if you're cramped on space, that's the only option. But this just kind of gives you an idea, and that's something that STCR will work with you guys on what makes the most sense. Let's talk about the software. You can't talk about hardware and without software. So the good thing about the software is whether you're running our ACE platform or Lock SMS, it's already been integrated with our check software. So the way it works is you have your self-checkout hardware, right? Your system 7, you have your operating system. The actual point of sale application logic, business logic is running inside the machine, right? And then you have the check software on top. So what that means is this: you don't have, and nor do you have to worry about a separate set of prices for the self-checkout or item information. None of that is stored in the self-checkout. All of it is still stored in your server in the back room, part of the point of sale. If it's wrong at the point of sale, it's going to be wrong at the self-checkout. If the sale price is wrong at the point of sale, the sale price is going to be wrong at the self-checkout. So my point here is this: all of the integration has already been done. So whatever loyalty promotions that you run today will execute at the self-checkout, no assembly required type deal. So again, that integration has already been done between the two. You don't have to worry about it. So essentially the self-checkout looks just like a point of sale on the back end. What does the check software do? The objective behind check software is to help you get through the transaction as fast as possible without getting stuck, right? But if you do get stuck, our goal, if you get an intervention, we call it, is to queue up that intervention for later, and hopefully you'll resolve it before hit the tender button, or the shopper assistant will come over and maybe check an ID or something. So the goal here is to let you get through it quickly. The way our systems works from a security perspective is there's patented algorithms that run in the system. So when you first get your system as it's being used in the background, it's learning the weight of all of your products. You don't have to tell it what the weight is. It's going to learn the weight of all of your products. And after 10 good scans, it's going to lock the weight of that UPC in the database, in the weight database. And anytime a shopper comes through and the weight is outside of that range, it's going to cause a weight security error and stop the lane and have a shopper assistant come and inspect what's going on. But the good thing about our system is it's got an overlay system called shopper behavior. And what happens is, let's say you're there at the self-checkout lane, then shopper's scanning some items, everything's going good. They put their purse, let's say, in the bagging area. The lane's going to complain, please remove unscanned item, which is your purse. As long as you remove that purse before hitting the tender key, it'll never stop the lane because you as a shopper corrected your own error. So that's how we minimize the frustration and friction and intervention rate at the self-checkout. It keeps a history of all those things that occur. You can change the level of security at any time on the lane if you choose to, right? You can limit how many times a PLU number is entered. Maybe you only want to let them do bananas once versus twice, just for security reasons, because it's a low-cost item. We handle special handling items. So items that are very bulky, we don't want them putting them in the bagging area. So when they scan those, it'll instruct them to keep it in their cart. Maybe there's optionable pass around items. So greeting cards, floral, they don't want to put it in the bagging area, keep it in their cart. You can flag the system to do that. We always recommend that you have a hand scanner on the lane to scan those bulk items so they're not trying to lift it above the scanner scale. So that's a feature that you can do. So the good thing about the check software is you have 3 modes of operation. One of them is full security, everything I've talked about with the weight security and the POUs and all that good stuff, limiting what they can do. There's shopper speed mode. So what is that? That's where you would turn off the weight security. That's something that Walmart does. And other retailers do to limit the number of interventions they have. We highly recommend you don't turn that off, because if you do, your shrink's going to go up because now there is no security at the lane. The only use case I can ever think of for doing something like that would be maybe you have a problem with the weight security scale. You want to temporarily turn it off until it can get fixed, but you want to keep the lane open. That would be the only use case I can think of. And then there's cashier speed mode. What is that? That is where maybe it's the day before Thanksgiving, you're getting slammed. You want to turn that into a POS lane, so you convert it into a POS lane. And then basically what it does is it turns off all security on the lane. You plant a cashier there to run and operate that lane at full speed ahead and make sure it's a cash model. That way they can accept cash or let the customer pay with a card. But again, that's where you can plant a cashier there temporarily to run it in cashier speed mode. What we did with our System 7 is we wanted to change the experience for the shopper. So we have these nice LED lights that will guide the shopper through the transaction every step of the way. Then we have our screens, right? We really limited what we put on our screen. So the goal here is to kind of have a configurable theme, you have a scrollable receipt, you have your message bar at the bottom with the scale information, you have a message bar at the top, you have a picture showing what to do next, you have a large button area, and then you have a toolbar at the bottom where they can change the language, request help, change the volume and all that. If they go to enter in produce items, they can look up that item by PLU number, by image, by name. It'll give them a flip chart. Then you would work with STCR to organize these flip charts so they can quickly find their products. I'll show you something here in a couple minutes which will simplify that. Maybe you do reusable bags. Maybe you can't do the regular plastic bags. We have a feature and function for that. Maybe you want to do paper bags and charge for them. We have a feature function for that built right into the system. You could take advantage of it. So let's talk about loss prevention, right? Can't talk about self-service without talking about shrink and loss prevention. So I'm going to show you some of the things that we're doing from a loss prevention perspective. These are just a kind of a snapshot of what we're working on and what we've already done, right? So we talk about produce recognition. We'll show you some of that. Bottom of the basket, again, recognizing there's an item under there. And stop the transaction until they do something with that item. That's kind of a roadmap item. Biometric age verification, that's something else we're dabbling in right now. And then item identification, we'll show you some of that. So what we've announced is what's called our Alera Integrated Security Suite. So kind of phase one of that is produce recognition. I'm going to show you a quick demo of that. Phase two is overhead shopper behavior. I'm going to show you a video of that. Then we're going to integrate these two cameras together. That's a roadmap item. We're going to do a bottom of the basket option. That'll be a roadmap item. And then have a camera pointing into the security scale. That's another roadmap item. So our objective here is, as time goes on, getting all these cameras to talk with one another, because it's all based on AI technology. It gets smarter the more they're being used. And that way it'll help improve the throughput of the lane, but more importantly, help reduce shrink even more. And then obviously a picture of the shopper with a personal video monitor that's available today. We'll talk about that. So let's talk about produce rec. What are we trying to solve here? So think about it, right? I'm a shopper. I'm pulling my cart up to the self-service lanes. I got a lot of produce. I don't want to go through that lane because I got to look for every produce item. I got to type in a PLU. That's the one thing we're trying to solve for. The next thing we're trying to solve for is this. Scanning errors. So I'm at the self-checkout and I have a scanning error. How do I solve some of that? Those are additional things I'm trying to solve for. So what we do with produce recognition is we're allowing self-service to come into play, right? So as you put your items on the scale, right? What we're going to do is we're going to try to recognize what that produce item is for the customer to minimize the shrink. Right? So if we can minimize the errors that the customer may make by picking the wrong product, you can reduce shrink there. And the way we do that is with a camera. So basically we have a camera, an AI camera, edge cam, that's pointing and looking at the security scale, at the scanner scale. And as the shopper's putting items on there, it's analyzing what that item is. So here's kind of the process that we go through. You put the item on the scanner scale, it triggers an alert. The edge camera will look at the item. It'll try to identify what that produce item is. It's going to show the shopper on the screen a short list of items, allow the shopper to select one, and then it's done. It takes all of that telemetry data that it's gathered from what the customer took, what the camera's seen, it sends it up to the cloud. Our data scientists analyze all that. And what we do is 4 times a year, we collect everything from all of our users, and we send down new models into the camera every single, 4 times a year of new produce items. We fine tune it for based on usage and all that. So the more it gets used, the smarter it gets. So I'm actually going to show you a real live demo of the way produce recognition will work in your store. This is available today with our self-checkouts.
Today we're going to show you the Toshiba Produce Recognition solution. For the demo, we're running a System 7 unit that's running our check software, along with a Toshiba Edge camera that's actually doing the computer vision algorithms on the camera itself. let's get started. In order to enter produce using self-checkout, again, you indicate that you're entering produce. You put your item on the scale. The system recognizes the item. For items that have both organic and non-organic items, both are shown for the shopper to choose. Here, we'll select our bananas, add them to the cart. The solution also works with bags. So here we have an avocado, put in a bag, select produce recognition. The item gets recognized. We add it to our cart. We also recognize items that are in a reusable bag. So here we have oranges, put them on the scale, request the system to identify them, and it does identify the items. So the other feature of the solution is allowing the shopper to correct their own mistakes that they could have inadvertently made while shopping. So here, we'll put garlic on the scale, allow the system to identify it. Let's assume the shopper says they don't want to use that item, they want to key the PLU in themselves. They inadvertently enter the wrong item number. So what the system will do will show them exactly what the camera observes, the item they entered, and what the system selects as the actual item on the scale. Here, the shopper can easily correct their mistake and enter the correct item. Next, loss prevention in terms of customers that are not making accidental mistakes. In this example, they're trying to purchase a steak for a banana. They put the steak on the scale. Enter the produce. The system does not recognize the item, so the shopper can key in their own item number. So here we're keying in bananas. The system shows what was actually on the scale, the item that the shopper entered, so they know that they've been caught. They can continue down this path and say they want to select the bananas anyway. Once they put the item in the bag, the shopper assistant is called over to be able to address the situation. Once they scan their shopper assistant card, we show the item image of the steak. We show that the shopper entered the banana, so the shopper assistant can void the item at this point in time to continue the transaction. That's Toshiba's produce recognition solution.
All right, so that kind of gave you a quick idea. So not only is it recognizing the produce, it's also recognizing when they're trying to steal from you at the self-checkout by typing in the incorrect PLU. So that's available today. If you're running our Toshiba Ace point-of-sale software product, the exact same thing you just seen at the self-checkout lane is also available at the point-of-sale lane if you're running a DataLogic 9800i scanner scale. So that exact same software will run under Ace. If you're running Lock SMS, we're looking to create a set of APIs that Lock can take advantage of. It'll probably be later this year where they can do the same thing at the Lock SMS point-of-sale lane as well. So the next turn of the crank that we just announced back in December was the customer behavior, kind of the overhead camera looking at the customer's behavior over the scanner scale. So what we've done is we've mounted to the transaction awareness light a camera that is, again, a full motion camera, not still pictures like the produce rec, and that's looking, and it's an AI camera watching the customer's behavior. And what we do is we have scan zones that are above the scanner scale that we're looking down. So what we're trying to catch is a ghost scan. What is a ghost scan? A ghost scan is when the shopper, whether they do it intentionally or not, takes an item, scans it over the scanner scale and puts it in the bagging area, not realizing that it didn't scan. Now, was it a mistake? Was it intentional? Did they cover the barcode with their hand? Who knows what? But that's the whole objective behind this AI solution with the computer vision, is to really catch that. So I'm going to show you a quick video, and I think you're going to realize when you watch this video, and this is during our proof of concept, you see that green circle, you're going to look for a miscan in there when they act like they're scanning, but they really didn't. And you can tell by this shopper, this is an intentional ghost scan, not an unintentional one. So I'm going to let this video run. And this is available today with our solution. So this person looks around, nobody's looking. Let me fake scan it, put it in the bag, and then you see misscan in that green circle. So it's catching the shopper in the act of stealing from you at the self-checkout itself. So that's kind of the first one. That's available today. These are additional use cases that we are working on. So it'll use the same hardware technology. It'll be some new software that we'll have available later on in the year. So the way this one works is the scan zone is not only above the scanner scale, but it's also in front of the self-checkout. And what it's trying to capture is going from the basket directly to the bagging area, bypassing the scanner scale altogether. So again, look in that green circle for the misscan. So if you watch this lady, everything's going great. I'll take these items. I'm not even going to scan them. I'm going to put them right in the bagging area, and then you're going to see a misscan show up. So that kind of caught her doing that. The one on the right is my favorite one. This person is going to start, scans the first item, everything's working great. Here's a nice hat. You know what? I'm just going to put it on my head. I'm not going to scan it, and boom, you have misscan on the screen. So that kind of caught that shopper red-handed, just stealing that hat right at the self-checkout. So those are, again, these two on this page are future use cases that we're working on, but again, it'll use the same camera technology. You don't have to purchase additional hardware. It'll just be an additional module on the software side. At a worst case, if you do nothing else, and these you can do today, obviously, is you can do personal video monitor. So again, this is where the shopper can see themselves shopping. It's more of an intimidation thing. Now, whether you record this or not, that's your prerogative, but you can either do a camera mounted right above the screen. We do have some incremental software that you can purchase that plugs into the check software, which will show the shopper's face right on the screen. Or you can just do a third-party monitor that you see here on a transaction awareness light that shows the actual shopper with the built-in camera. Those are two options. Again, you always should have something watching the shopper as they're shopping at self-checkout, just for your own sake. There's about 16 different things that we do to prevent interventions. I'm not going to take the time and go through these. Basically, these charts will be available to you if you ask Angel or the STCR team for these. They'll make them available to you. But there's about 16 different things, many of them that are patented, that we do to minimize friction at the self-checkout. So you can kind of look through those. So let's talk about the shopping experience. If you remember, I said you can't do self-service without talking about the actual experience. So this is where the shopper assistant comes into play. You've probably been into a store, you've seen a podium there, and at the podium you see a shopper attendant standing there, leaning behind the podium, checking their Facebook status, doing whatever they do. And as the intervention occurs, they're going to go to the screen that's sitting on top of the podium and clear the intervention. That is the wrong way to do it. I highly encourage you not to do that. You want your shopper assistant working with the shoppers in the lane, helping them, greeting them. They have a shopper assistant card. When something goes wrong, they can scan that card, go to the lane, clear the intervention, educate the shopper what caused the intervention, so maybe they can prevent it next time, right? Their job is to watch the transaction awareness light, look at the customer's body language, listen to the audio prompts. But the most important thing they can do for you is to greet every shopper in that shopping area and just say, hi, my name is Paul. Please let me know if you need any assistance. I'll be right over here. Just by making eye contact with the shopper and greeting the shopper, the chances of that shopper stealing from you in the self-checkout area are slim to none. They're going to do it somewhere else if they want to steal from you. So the point here is you got to man the lanes. If you want to put a podium there, push it off to the side, put a point of sale lane on there to handle any type of, you can transfer orders to clear up any interventions that they have. When an error occurs, they're going to go to the lane, they'll scan their shopper assistant card. It'll let them do whatever they need to that order to get the shopper on their way. And that's what these screens are all about. We also have what we call Mobile Operation Manager. We've renamed it to Mobile Assist. So this is a handheld device that you can run the software on it as if you were standing in front of the self-checkout lane. So any interventions that you would clear in front of the lane, you can do it remotely with this device if you needed to do that. Use case might be customer service counter, your shopper assistant called in sick, you don't have anybody cover it, you want to keep the lanes open, so you can use this device to monitor the lanes remotely, declare interventions to kind of get them on their way. Again, exception, not the rule, right? There's a lot of discussion versus cash versus card. I will tell you, don't be like some retailers and say, you know what, because of the price, I'm just going to go cashless. Again, you need to figure out per store what percentage of transactions are cash versus card. Not the number of transactions, but the dollar amounts, right? That will tell you what's going through your self-checkouts versus for cash versus card. You want to figure that out. Is it 20%? Is it 30% cash? And based on that, you would dictate per store what the mix is going to be. And again, that's something that we would work with you guys on as you go through that. Placement has a big deal where it goes in the store. We always recommend putting them in the center if you can for loss prevention reasons. Don't do like the big stores and throw them on the end. It's easier for them to do that. We always recommend try to put them in the center, put them in a courtyard environment where they're facing each other, wrap them around with merchandise racks, have one line forming going in. This one doesn't show that, but that's kind of what you want. You want one line going in. This is a STCR store, Key Food in New York City. I love this. This is our previous generation. But my point is they were able to cram 11 self-checkouts in a tiny space. They broke all of our rules when it comes to spacing, but you know what? It works. It works for the store. It works for this location. So again, we'll work with you to figure out what will fit in your store to get the best throughput. That's the key here. So the back office system server. So this is a system that can sit in your store or can sit at a headquarter location. And this is what all of the lanes are going to talk to. This is what houses your weight database. This is where your shopper assistant ID cards get created, what their authorization levels are. But the important thing about the boss, right, back office system server is the reporting. This is where you're going to go learn about the reporting. So average basket size, what lanes are doing what interventions you had, what not on files you had. You can do a top 25 report. This is where you're going to get the heartbeat of your system. So, STCR will educate you on what these reports do. Why are they important? It's very important to look at the reports to continue to improve your operations within the store. As far as managed services go, what does that mean? Sorry, I went the wrong way. What does that mean basically is getting help, right? So what do you do? What lanes do you have to remove to install self-checkouts? Do you want to get cables installed in manufacturing for your scanner scales and your pin pads? We'll work with you on all that. So we'll STCR, right? There'll be optional training for you to go live. All those things are part of the whole package when they talk to you on that. As far as sales and service go, Toshiba badged employees are there to service this equipment, so you never have to worry about that. We have spare parts in our vans, so if need be, we can service the self-checkouts no different than we service your point of sale. So quick summary, right? Basically, if you decide to move forward or you kind of want to go to the next step, once you go forward, you definitely want to do best practice training, and this is where we come into play. Never do self-checkout implementation without doing best practice training. If you do that, you're going to fail, right? There's certain things you do and you don't. Your store has to be ready. Your employees need to be ready. You got to have certain layouts. We'll help you with the layouts. What really influences that shopping experience, right? It's not the demographics. It's really the employees inviting shoppers to use it, i.e. the shopper assistant, the experience while they're using it, and then managing those queues at the front end. Those are extremely important. You want to keep the lines flowing, and that's really where the utilization comes into play. And best practices is key to get you successful in that. So with that, I left about 15 minutes for Q&A. I know we won't have that many, but what questions can I answer that you all have had? Angel, I'm not sure if anybody has any questions yet.
I have one question here.
Okay.
If someone is interested in self-checkout, what are the next steps you recommend to take?
Yeah, so I would recommend is getting with your sales rep at STCR, sitting down with them, and they'll ask you some questions. And really the questions are really, what are you trying to solve for? Are you just trying to give your shoppers a choice? Are you trying to get more express shoppers through your store? They're going to come and kind of do a site survey to say, okay, if you have 4 lanes today or 6 lanes today, here's how we would fit X number of self-checkouts in the store. What's the best configuration for the self-checkout? Is it cash? Is it card? Is it a large? Is it a medium? Is it an extra large? So they'll ask some probing questions, what your average basket size is. And then based on that, we can do a layout to figure out, okay, how's it going to fit? Based on that, you can do a price. They'll give you some pricing on that. And then obviously you'd get them on order. And then once they get on order, we would do a best practice session for you guys to make sure you're ready to go once the lanes land at the store. Get them installed, and you run your pilot store, and you will have success. And I'll tell you, I've seen this time and time again. Your shrink will go down if you do self-service correctly. The reason for that is you and I both know that the majority of your shrink comes from employees. So when you start to remove cashiers from touching the product, touching the cash, and you have security built in to your self-checkout, that's weight-based security, produce recognition, the overhead, loss prevention. Once you start factoring in all those things, you have more security at self-checkout than you do the POS lane. So your shrink will actually go down. If you think self-service is autopilot, you're going to fail. You're not going to do well. So again, it's important to follow best practices, and that's what we teach you as a next step process as well. Good question. Angel, what else you got?
So I have one more. It says, what was it? You said SMS was not ready, but ACE POS is?
Yep. Okay. So with the produce recognition, so produce recognition today is released on our self-checkout system. So it runs on the check software. It also runs with our ACE point of sale. So if you're running ACE point of sale in the store today, that same software will run at your point of sale terminal. So again, it'll be a camera mounted to the top-down reader that's on your scanner scale, and it'll recognize the produce. So the cashier can hit a button to find the produce at the actual point of sale lane versus going to a flip chart. We are looking to create an integration with Lock, right, where Lock can take advantage of that solution with SMS. That's not available yet today. It's part of our roadmap to make those APIs available to Lock software so they could take advantage of produce rec at the point of sale lane like they can at the self-checkout. So if you're running Lock today in your store with self-checkout, you can take advantage of it at the self-checkout, just not the point of sale lane. Hopefully that makes sense. Any other questions?
I have an additional question on that. I apologize.
Sorry.
Does it know the difference between original versus conventional? Is what the question is. I think it's additional to the one you just asked. Organic, does it know?
Oh, organic.
Okay. Yeah, I apologize.
Yeah,
organic.
No worries. Yeah, so that's a tricky one, right? It really doesn't. Now, keep in mind, it's all AI technology, right? So the more it gets used at your store and everybody else's stores, we're consolidating all of that data, right? So if your store, let's say, does a green band around the organic item, right, it's going to start to learn that. So as we update the models, yes, it will be able to identify, well, this had a green band around it, so it's organic versus non-organic. Other from that, what it will do is, and this is part of what we call PLU mapping. So what happens is if there's an item, let's pick on a banana, right? You have a banana that's organic and non-organic. It's always going to show on the screen the non-organic and the organic item to give the shopper the benefit of the doubt to select the organic one. And what we've learned over the years, believe it or not, is 99% of shoppers are honest at self-service because they don't want to get caught. So as long as they can find the organic item on the flip chart, they're probably going to pick it unless they're intentionally trying to steal from you. So we always are going to list the organic item next to the non-organic item as part of produce recognition, so they pick the right one. So it's only going to show 3 or 4 on the screen, and of that you'll have organic and non-organic. And again, this is why you want your shopper assistant to greet every shopper. They're looking at them face to face, talking to them. Hey, I'm over here watching you, so you better pick organic. But yeah, the technology from an AI perspective is not smart enough yet to really distinguish the difference between organic and non-organic produce. Good question. All right, what else?
Okay, I think that's everything. So I just wanted to mention next month we'll be doing our next installment of the self-checkout monthly master series on April 4th at 2:30 Eastern Standard Time. And the topic will be best practices for those who are familiar with self-checkouts. Also, later this month, we'll be hosting our next monthly installment of our Lunch and Learn series on Thursday, March 28th at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That session will be focused on eSuite reporting. If there's nothing else, thank you all for joining us, and everyone have a great day.
All right, thank you all. Take care. Bye-bye.